What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day, morning, noon, night, whatever it is for you. Hope you're having the best day possible. Now, guys, today we're going to be getting back into some Weshammer for you guys. Now, we've talked about Tyranids, Votan. Today, we are going to be talking about the Necrons. Now, they're on par with the Tyranids, par with the Orcs. So I think this is going to be pretty cool to watch. So let's go ahead and get into this for you guys. Weshammers, the Necrons. Are you ready?
None of them are quite as mysterious or as complex as the Necrons. Now these
The
are beings out
Necron.
of time, a species that should have been confined to the grave millions of years ago. They are a relic of a horrific time in the universe's history, where the entire galaxy was engulfed in the flames of war. Nowadays, the Necrons exist as a cautionary tale of what the quest for vengeance and immortality can bring. They are an absolutely ancient species, the oldest in the galaxy in fact, and in the time of flesh and blood nearly 60 million years ago, they waged an impossible war against godlike species known as the Old Ones. Now their hatred of them was so severe that they were willing to sacrifice their very souls to see their enemies eradicated. They made deals with terrifying eldritch gods and traded everything for immortality. The once proud yet frail Necron tier shed their living forms in exchange for the undying metal bodies we know today. And although originally betrayed and deceived by those
I know
very
flesh
same
is
gods,
weak,
the
but
Necrons would suffer no one above them.
we want
Against their unholy
strength.
masters, shattering and shackling them to their engines of war, turning their horrifying destructive abilities against those that would deny them as the masters of the physical universe. Now these monsters at one point had been successful in conquering nearly the entire galaxy. They saw all life as beneath them and preyed on the living, feeding them to their gods like livestock. And then suddenly, they vanished. The unstoppable silver tide of death and horror that had enslaved gods and committed a million-year xenocide of unimaginable proportions disappeared without a trace, never
Where'd
to be
they go?
seen again. Now, for millions of years, these stories were thought to be no more than a legend, a metaphor for the price of vengeance, or possibly even just a scary bedtime story that
Scary
the Eldar would tell their
bedtime
children.
story.
But here in the 41st millennium,
Like
it has
Baba
become
Yaga.
apparent that these impossible
Baba
tales were
Yaga.
true, that the Necrons had returned, and they had come back to reclaim what was once theirs, and eradicate all that stood in their way.
When the Necron tier shed flesh and left death for lesser creatures, we thought of only freedom from fear and making kingdoms that would never die. We did not think of what else immortality would entail. We thought in terms of wars and destruction and conquest. But eternity also requires what you would call entertainment.
What?
To engage the Necrons in battle
Entertainment.
is to fight death itself. Their undying legions harness some of the most advanced technology the galaxy has ever seen. They are arrogant and soulless and see all organic life as beneath them. Now to stare into the glowing green eye sockets of the Necron is to see eons of hatred made manifest, to witness the rise and fall of countless empires, and to truly know the bitter price of hatred. You would see the futility of struggle. How do you kill something that can't die? How do you wage war against something that is so more advanced than you? Then the most powerful weapons you can bring to bear are no better than sticks and stones. And how do you
But guys, what immortality? I mean, yeah, cool in practice, I guess. But you gotta think about it. Unless everybody you know and love is immortal too, what's really the perk of being immortal? I mean, you're gonna literally watch everybody, everything wither and die around you. I don't think that'd be fun. And then you get to watch these little kids grow up, get old, and die. Yeah, that just don't sound fun. But let's keep going.
prepare for a war that can come from any direction at any moment, even from beneath your own feet? And what do you do when you realize that everything you
Where they at?
thought to be true was a lie? That your pathetic view of the superiority of your species and your claim to the universe was built upon nothing more than ignorance and wishful thinking? What do you do when the world your people have called home for millions of years, the one that birthed your species and whose value cannot be quantified? What do you do when you realize your people are nothing more than an infestation, a squatter that's overstayed its welcome? And what do you do when its true owners return to evict you? So if you've ever read anything about the
You
Necrons,
fight
you've probably
back?
heard that their planets are normally referred to as tomb worlds. But
Yeah.
what exactly is a tomb world?
I don't know.
So you can honestly think of a tomb world as basically a planet-sized crypt, an eternal resting place of the Necrons. Each contain deep labyrinthian underground structures that can house millions of them, each one locked away in stasis for millions of years. Although the Necrons are sealed away deep
That's a
in
long
stasis,
time.
the halls of these structures are actively patrolled by their canoptic constructs. They maintain and repair the crypts and keep everything in working order, eagerly awaiting the return of their dormant masters. So even though these structures are slumbering, they're maintained by
Giant
incredibly
metal
complex AI systems that
centipede
monitor
and
the Necrons and
spiders.
keep the complex safe from intruders. These worlds these structures are confined to
There's bugs
were once ruled
everywhere.
by the Necrons during the War in Heaven. However, since these structures have lain dormant for around 60 million years, many of them have been colonized by new species. You would have no way of knowing that you're on a tomb world until it comes online and the Necrons try to remove you. The process of which a tomb world can become active are numerous.
Interesting.
It could be the result of a simple timer going off, geological activity that damages the structure, or even its AI detecting intrusive life forms within the confines of its halls. Now, it's not uncommon for eccentric and hopeful individuals to end up digging too deep within the surface of their world, seeking to mine natural resources only to discover the ancient crypt of the Necrons. Now, obviously hindsight is 20/20 here, but the correct thing to do would be fill that hole
Get
back
out.
up and pretend you never saw anything.
Yeah,
However, the
definitely.
greed of sentient species knows no bounds.
Yeah, didn't an Adeptus Mechanicus accidentally open one of these tombs and woke up the Necrons? God, retard. Ugh.
And the promise of ancient alien archaeotech is too tempting to be resisted. Now, this simple act of curiosity is often the catalyst that spells the doom of many a world. Now, however a tomb world ends up becoming active,
Curiosity
when an awakening is
killed the
triggered,
cat.
it's basically the apocalypse. The complex begins to rise from beneath the surface. Massive earthquakes across the planet devastate the population. Oceans drain away and lava boils to the surface. Now, amidst the calamity of natural disasters, the immortal killing machines begin to claw their way to the surface, rising up within the very foundation of their intruders' defensible structures. Quite often, this actually resembles something out of an old zombie movie.
Literally,
Undead
that's what
robots
I'm
literally
thinking.
rising from their graves to eradicate the living, swarms of alien constructs blotting out the sun, and long-dead lords rising from their graves to take command of their legions once again. In deafening silence, they ordered the destruction of the living and a cleansing of the unclean from their sacred world. The weapons these creatures wield are unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. It is seemingly as advanced as it is ancient, mass-produced gauze weaponry that flays skin from the bone and can reduce the target to nothing more than atoms in mere moments. Even the lowliest of warriors is equipped with advanced targeting arrays that make them devastatingly accurate. Necron pilots are hardwired.
I'm sorry, guys, but he just said even the lowliest warriors get good weapons. That just reminds me of the the 10 worst jobs where all they give them is a las gun. This basically just like a flashlight. Oh goodness, guys. Oh, the Necrons.
Into their vehicles, their machines basically becoming an extension of themselves. And without organic bodies that are subject to the laws of physics, they're able to make absolutely impossible maneuvers that would kill a normal flesh and blood pilot. The majority of their soldiers are immortal.
Think about those G-forces
that seek to purge all life from a world. The attacks come with no warning as the world's defenses are quickly overwhelmed. All organic life is atomized and the Necrons take no prisoners. If a species is fast enough to get a distress beacon out, the world their allies come to defend will look radically different. The architecture of the previous owners has been left in ruins, and all that remains of organic life is but dust in the wind. Instead, they find colossal monolithic structures of ancient alien design, architecture that hasn't seen the light of a sun in 60 million years. They are met with unbelievable resistance from a newly embedded ruler. Now, what makes the Necrons particularly dangerous is the fact that they're all basically immortal. Each one is comprised of a living metal substance known as the necrodermis. Their bodies can repair themselves from all but the most catastrophic of damage.
Epidermis,
now, if the damage is too great to be
necrodermis.
repaired in the fight itself, they can also utilize a phasing technology. This teleports the wounded or crippled individual and all of their equipment out of the battle and back to the safety of their tomb world.
Well, that's nice. He's got an escape rope.
And this allows them to take enormous amounts of punishment and heal from practically any injury. This makes them incredibly difficult to destroy or even capture. We have no way of studying them or their technology. We only have first-hand accounts of the worlds they have purged, data logs and Vox transcripts from the moments of annihilation, a warning in the darkness of what is to come. And here's the thing about the Necrons.
They're coming. They're coming out of the ground.
They see no difference between the forces of humanity, the slaves to chaos, or the various alien races that inhabit the galaxy. All are vermin and must be purged. The galaxy once belonged to the Necrons.
Squash like a bug.
Their conquest of eradication will never end so long as the living still draw breath within their kingdom. Now, depending on when you started reading about the Necrons, their lore has actually undergone a couple of different iterations over the years.
That's
now,
cool.
The old lore basically portrayed the Necrons as an unstoppable tide of robot zombies, Terminators that would appear without warning and purge all life from a planet. There was no
that would be
with them, no
scary.
communication, and they were beyond mysterious. We knew practically nothing about them. And that was honestly kind of part of their charm. They were meant to be this super mysterious and horrifying entity, an archetype of terror. They existed to demonstrate just how brutal and unforgiving the galaxy truly was. That for all of our understanding and all of our knowledge, there were things in this universe we couldn't even begin to comprehend. That our persistence was ultimately futile, and the superiority of mankind nothing but a myth. However, more recent
we're not superior to them.
Words has actually kind of fleshed them out quite a bit, giving the Necrons a voice and ourselves a deeper insight into what they used to be and what they have become. Now, it was once believed that all Necrons lacked any form of consciousness. However, we know now that basically the more important a Necron was in life, the more sentience they maintain in their current form. This means that Necron nobles are incredibly intelligent and fully capable of communication and have their personalities intact. Their minds are unburdened from the limitations of flesh. They are able to process information much quicker than a normal human and have various neural programs that enhance their minds even further. Now, one such cognitive upgrade is known as subminds. A Necron lord who has been upgraded with such a thing basically has multiple brains. These are often reflections of their own mind, but hyper-specialized in certain...
So, these Necron lords basically have what is that thing that Elon's making? Something's supposed to go in your brain, supposed to make you smarter and upgrade your interface real fast. That's what it sounds like these guys have. Just minus the flesh. Yeah.
Certain areas. Now, in the novel The Twice Dead King, the main character Oltex is equipped with multiple subminds, each a copy of his own, yet completely dedicated to one specific aspect of his
Neuralink, that's what it's called.
In this way, he's able to have full and complete dialogues with himself, in order to come up with the best possible path of action for any given situation. Of his multiple subminds, one is dedicated to war,
it's not a bad problem to have.
Another to politics, and another is completely dedicated to xenology. So, in a sense, no matter where he goes, he has a team of trained scholars inside his head to help him make decisions. And speaking of which, let's speak a bit more on Necron dynasties and their nobility. Now, there are many great Necron dynasties, each led by a different ruling class. They all have different wants, desires, and plans, and it's actually really interesting to see them bicker and squabble amongst themselves. Now, despite their background, all Necrons are a proud people, heavily inspired by the ancient Egyptian culture of Earth. Now, despite their superhuman levels of intellect, not all of the Necrons made it through the deep sleep with their minds completely intact. It is said that a great madness has infected the Necron people, and many of them have had their minds kind of deteriorated over the years. Now, what that means is unique to the individual, but it's
after 60-some million years, I wonder why.
Hyper-aggressive when he reawakens. Now, when it comes to communication, Necrons are fully capable of speech, but there's no real reason to do this other than out of tradition. Now, most of the time, they are basically communicating through a form of binary, which in addition uses a series of glyphs represented on their bodies. Now, these glyphs give further emphasis to emotion, and you can basically think of them like a high form of emoji. These can represent happiness, sadness, anger, futility, anything you can think of. Now, likewise, their ships are often completely uninhabitable by organic life, as the Necrons have no need for air. They are literally floating tombs inhabited only by the dead. Of all the things the Necrons are known for, their technology and superior weaponry are probably their #1 claim to fame. So let's talk a bit more about their weapons. Of all the weaponry utilized by the Necrons, none is more iconic or commonplace than that of Gauss technology. Now, Gauss weapons come in many different forms, but all of them work by projecting a beam of energy that disrupts and disassembles matter at the molecular level. In a practical sense, this technology can be used by constructs such as scarabs to disassemble matter into its core components, and then use those to reconstruct into something new. Breaking down rocks to then use those molecules to create something more useful, like a bridge or a fortress, for example.
That'd
now,
be nice
when
to have.
utilized as a weapon, the gauze beam creates a devastating effect on living flesh. It basically breaks down the impact site and turns the target into dust. The effects of the beam go
Like
layer by
Thanos.
layer on the target, tearing them apart piece by piece. Now, needless to say, this is a pretty horrific way to go, and the gauze weaponry is rightfully feared. These weapons can take the form of mass-produced gauze rifles to the massive gauze flux arrays, the larger of which can
Gauze
tear apart
flux
hordes of
arrays.
infantry in mere moments. Now, another common form of Necron weaponry is known as Tesla weapons. Now, these firearms
Tesla
fire
weapons.
arcing bolts of lightning that can bounce from target to target, increasing in strength every time they jump. Now, if they're allowed to jump too quickly, these arcs can become powerful enough to crack concrete. Now, although an interesting fact about them, these weapons are normally used more for engaging with a lot of lightly armored foes, whereas the gauze weaponry is much better against highly armored targets. Now, particle weapons are completely different from the first two. Whereas gauze weaponry disrupts matter and causes it to break apart, a particle weapon basically energizes atoms and causes them to violently be
Speed
repelled
up.
from one another.
No.
The target literally tearing itself apart. Now, this can render human soldiers into piles of goo or cause tanks to collapse in on themselves, as the atoms that held them together are ripped in every direction. And finally, let's talk about the big guns. Now, these are known as doomsday weapons.
No
They
thanks.
are massive hulking death machines that have to be mounted on a stable weapons platform, as they are far too large to be wielded by infantry. Now, they use a massive stream of plasma that is focused and projected through a targeting crystal, which unleashes a hellish beam of devastating light that eradicates everything in its path.
Hyper
Now, the prey these
beam.
are used against are far larger and more dangerous than any infantry. Now, some of them are capable of obliterating even the largest of war machines, tearing out the heart of an Imperial Titan in a single
I was about to
shot.
say, is that a
And in order to
Titan they're
not
using it
bog
on?
this video down by listing literally every type of Necron weapon ever documented, I'll make a point to mention the
there's
most
a lot.
devastating creation in the entire galaxy. Now, it is known as the Celestial Orrery, and it's basically a giant holographic map of the Milky Way.
That sounds
Every star,
interesting.
every solar system, every sector is illuminated within it in precise detail. Now, traditionally this thing is used more like a scrying device, as having
Like
a
a
map
map?
of everything that updates practically in real time is an unbelievably valuable tool. However,
Yeah.
the Celestial Orrery harbors a much darker
Road
function,
work ahead.
in that the user can literally select stars
Make a
within the
U-turn.
map and basically tap them out of existence. Now, if the user was so inclined, he could cause any star in the galaxy to supernova, unleashing destruction on a cosmic scale never before seen. Now, how such a
Jeez.
creation works is a complete mystery, and because this thing is a creation of sheer horrific magnificence,
Is it
the entire
kinda like Exterminatus?
protection. And although many other dynasties or even forces outside of the Necrons would love to get their hands on this thing, the Orrery dynasty will eternally defend it with their lives. Seeking counsel with the Celestial Orrery is not something that's out of the question, it's just very difficult to do.
I can kind of do that.
Now, in the novel
Look.
The Infinite and the Divine, Trajan was able to use this thing to locate a particular device of interest to him. However, let's just say that the meeting did not go well and he's definitely banned from ever using it again. Now, the reason I bring this thing up is to elaborate on something of critical importance, for you to understand just how powerful the Necrons once were. You see, the War in Heaven was an event 60 million years ago that saw the entire galaxy engulfed in war.
Okay.
Every conflict we see in the 41st millennium supposedly pales in comparison to just how horrific this time period was. The Necrons had created weapons capable of killing gods, and after the war had ended, the Silent King ordered the destruction of all of them, seeing no reason for
Probably
such terrifying
smart.
weaponry to exist, as the cost to the universe would be too great if they ever fell into the
Devastating.
wrong hands. The Celestial Orrery was allowed to remain functional. So if this thing got the pass, we can only begin to imagine just how insane the other weapons must have been. Now, despite what we normally see in artwork and on the tabletop game, the reality is that most battles take place in the void of space. So let's take a moment to talk some more about their ships. So much like everything about the Necrons, the ships they use are incredibly advanced. So much so that their technology seems to be more akin to arcane magic than actual science. Now, what we know about them is shockingly very little, but we do know that they utilize two main types of systems to achieve faster than light travel. The first is what is known as an inertialess drive, meaning that somehow they have managed to break the laws of physics, and their ships create no inertia, meaning that in the vacuum of space, they are able to move incredibly quickly, possibly on par if not faster than those who utilize the warp to travel. Now, it goes without saying that utilizing something like this is obviously incredibly efficient and practical, as warp travel is insanely dangerous. Now, the second thing they use is a system of portals known as Dolem Gates. You see, these things allow the Necrons to
Gates.
infiltrate the webway, which is basically like a network of tunnels that spreads across the known galaxy. They exist as basically a pocket
Like
dimension
Stargate.
between the warp and real space, and are traditionally used only by the Eldar, as anyone who was able to infiltrate them would quickly get lost within their vast labyrinthian network of tunnels. Now, the Dolem Gates haven't been mentioned in a long time, so it's unclear if
I've
the
never
Necrons
heard of
still
them.
utilize them. Now, even though in the 41st millennium, the webway is currently mastered by the Eldari, it didn't always used to be that way. You see, it was originally created by the Old Ones, the ancient enemy of the Necrons, and who they fought during the War in Heaven. And
Looks
before
like
the Necrons
Jabba the
found a way
Hutt.
to infiltrate it, they were constantly outmaneuvered by the Old Ones.
Mixed with
It was the
Papa
creation
Nurgle,
of the
maybe.
Dolem Gates that quickly swung the war in the Necrons' favor. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and we'll talk about the War in Heaven in a little bit. Now, what's really interesting about
Okay.
their ships is that they have something of an Achilles heel. You see, their technology is unbelievably ridiculous, and it can actually prove to be ineffective against the barbaric and primitive technology utilized by the Imperium of Man. In the Twice Dead King, there is a group of Necrons that are fleeing from the Imperium.
What?
The torpedoes that mankind utilizes are seen as unbelievably primitive. The Necrons scoffing that the
Yeah.
brutish and uncivilized race of man still fires
You're throwing
physical
pebbles,
projectiles
dude.
at
Come
their
on.
enemies. This is seen as incredibly uncouth and boorish. That being said, the shield that their ships
Uncouth
use
and
were created to
boorish.
deflect blows from god weapons, energy-based weaponry that could shatter stars. They were not designed to protect against the spacefaring equivalent of throwing rocks at your enemy. Now, without getting into spoilers, this makes
So wait, you're telling me they have these ships that are so advanced, they have shields that can stop weaponry that can destroy stars, atoms, but they just forgot to include, energy weapons like bombs and stuff that, the Imperium of Man uses. So it works on them? What? Let's keep going.
makes the human pursuers in the story incredibly dangerous to the Necrons. So let's talk a little bit more about how Necron society is structured. Now, when it comes to the Necron hierarchy, each of the Tomb Worlds is ruled by a singular individual that controls a vast court of nobles. Now, smaller Tomb Worlds may be ruled by a lord or an overlord, whereas larger ones may be governed by what is known as a pharaon. There are hundreds of Necron dynasties, some splinters of much larger ones, but all with varying cultures and power levels, and the largest of which is known as the Sautek dynasty. Now, the Sautek dynasty is possibly the most well-known of all Necron dynasties. They have claimed hundreds of worlds since their time of awakening.
I ain't heard of
with
them.
more and more of their aligned Tomb Worlds coming
But I
online
knew it
every
is so.
day. Now, the Sautek dynasty is so large and powerful that it dwarfs all others by comparison. Ruled over by Imhotep the Stormlord, the Sautek dynasty is
Imhotep,
rigorously
the Star-Lord.
militaristic in nature, limiting its conquest to not just that of lesser races, but also those of rival dynasties. They seek to assimilate all Necrons under one banner. The Sautek dynasty wishes to reunite the
Okay.
Necron people once again, and if this must be done through military conquest, then so
Then
be
it's
it.
so
Now, many
be
lords
it.
will bend the knee to Imhotep's might before any blows are struck, often being highly praised and rewarded for doing so. Being folded into the ranks of the Sautek is deemed an honorable path to take. as
Bend the
wise ruler's
knee.
pride was less important than the good of his people. This is possibly the best outcome such an individual can hope for, as to deny the Stormlord's will is to invite an unwinnable war. Now, such a dynasty would be absolutely brutalized and inevitably absorbed into the Sautek legions anyways. Now, despite the vast cultural
Rockin' a
differences
hard
of many of the
place,
dynasties,
rockin' a hard
there's actually
place.
a lot of trends that remain the same within their various royal courts. You see, each court is made up of a lot of different members, each with different backgrounds. There are cryptechs who are basically like court wizards. There's scientists and engineers of the Necrons that study many of the arts that were practiced by their ancestors. These disciplines include that of biomancy, plasmancy, and even chronomancy, the study of manipulating time. Now, despite their seemingly arcane nature, all of these studies of the cryptechs are scientific in origin. To the casual observer, there is little difference between a trained cryptech and a psyker. Both are able to bend the nature of reality to their whim and unleash devastation upon
I
their enemies.
guess.
Now, like all Necrons, the cryptechs are beings of the physical universe, and thus have no ability to manipulate the warp. To do so requires a connection to the immaterium, and the Necrons do
And
not
they
have
ain't got that.
souls, and thus, for lack of better
They got the
words,
souls sucked
are
out.
basically just engram
They
copies
traded
of
'em.
consciousness. They cannot manipulate the immaterium. It doesn't change the fact that what they are capable of is truly remarkable. A skilled cryptech can bend space and time, not to mention keep the ancient machinery of the Necrons in working order. Other members of the court include that of royal wardens, and these guys basically act like a hybrid between a lieutenant on the battlefield and a trained diplomat. And when it comes to war, they make excellent lieutenants, commanding legions of troops in the name of their king. While simultaneously being trained in the art of dialogue and politics, they are able to speak for their lord when he isn't present. And the rewards for those that demonstrate competence in enacting the will of their king are vast and great. Whether they be gifted their own tomb world or their own swath of space to rule over is something that many lords strive for. The generosity of their king knows no bounds, but so does his wrath.
It's a giant Necron Susano.
The Lovecraftian horror of the Necrons is something much more earthly in nature. They are rigid people that adhere to tradition in the strictest of terms. These are holdovers from the time of flesh, where loyalty to one's king was of incredible importance. Concepts of subterfuge and going against his orders are unbelievably taboo. It's as if the ruler of a dynasty is seen as a living god, so to go against his will is out of the question. Now, this
we don't do
leads many
that.
nobles to having a sycophantic relationship with their lords, doing all they can to seek their favor. At the same time, a Necron king must embody the role of a living god without question. To show mercy is to display weakness to his subjects. Mercy and forgiveness are a sickness that will corrode even the strongest of dynasties. A Necron ruler must be like a wall that breaks the tides, never faltering in his goals or ambitions.
Never bending,
and although members of
never
his court
breaking.
seldom falter in their loyalty, this does not mean treachery cannot come from outside of a court. In this sense, many nobles are distrusting of outsiders from other dynasties. Now you see, the diversity of the Necrons doesn't begin and end within the confines of a dynasty, as there are various sub-factions and cults that are spread across all of Necron culture. Now, one of which is known as the Destroyer cult. You see, these individuals encompass the madness that can infect Necrons over time. Members of the Destroyer cult have an absolute disdain for all organic life. Now, Necrons in general
I want to meet him, but he looks cool.
Other sentient species as unclean. Lacking the purity of the metal form makes them inherently weak and uncivilized. However, there is a vastly larger portion of Necrons that want to undo what they see as the metal curse, hoping to find a way to reverse biotransference, the process that turned them into the Necrons we know today. But
interesting. They want to go back to the flesh.
Of these individuals that if they
like I
find
said,
a suitable
immortality ain't for everybody.
All other threats, then one day they might find a way to transfer their consciousness into said species. And in this way, the Necrons could pick up where they left off 60 million years ago. They would trade away immortality for a normal life. The Destroyer cult sees this concept as abhorrent. They wish to distance themselves from organics as much as possible. Often
you want to go backwards? Nah, we destroy you instead.
The Destroyers are death incarnate and will often purge entire worlds of every living creature, all the way down to microscopic organisms, using their god-killing weaponry to boil away oceans and scour the land.
I'm about to say, just blow the planet up.
Society, but they are often viewed as
why even go to the trouble?
And inherently untrustworthy. Now, that being said, the Destroyers are so good at doing what they do that only the most foolish and arrogant of lords would deny their usefulness. Destroyers are often taken as auxiliary forces or used as decimating shock troops, and despite how they are normally portrayed, they do have their own culture and values. What compels an individual to become a Destroyer is, however, currently unknown. Now, some believe that it is
I guess you don't know either, Wes.
Over from the shattering of one of
we
the
both got to figure it out.
A curse that, in reality, may just be some kind of program buried deep in their neural networks. Now, another slightly more disturbing faction of Necrons is known as the Flayed Ones. You see, Flayed Ones are viewed as diseased and twisted individuals. They are afflicted with a madness curse, known as the Flayer virus, that causes them to slowly go insane over time. Now, once afflicted with the Flayer virus, the Necron will begin to crave the taste of flesh. Now, this starts small at first. The individual may take a finger or some other grisly trophy from the battlefield and consume it in secret. Over time, the desire for meat grows stronger and stronger, until the individual completely loses himself to their hunger. Now, this can take years to develop. Some notable individuals holding off their transformation for multiple decades. Others with less strong wills can lose themselves quite quickly.
So, the Flayed Ones develop a taste for flesh. What? They're like robot vampires now. Necrons, I swear y'all keep getting stranger and stranger as we get deeper into this, but let's keep going.
And here's the really sad thing about this. The Necrons are robots. They don't have mouths or any type of digestive system for that matter.
Hey, where's
So
it
an
going?
individual afflicted with the curse can often be seen ripping and tearing into piles of bodies, trying to shove as much of the meat into their mouths as they can. But they don't have mouths. They just have a marking on their faceplate to show where a mouth once was. Viscera and gore smearing all over their bodies and dribbling down through their mechanical insides. They're like hungry ghosts, every day spent in agony, their hunger growing deeper and deeper, yet they cannot feed. Now over time, their bodies will begin to twist and mutate to better serve them as harvesters of gore. Their fingers and arms fusing together in long, thin, scythe-like blades, their spines twisting and contorting, and their limbs elongating, forcing them to permanently be hunched over, taking on the appearance of a crouching predator. The flayed ones are seen as the lowest form of life within Necron society, and the idea that any one of them could turn into such a creature is absolutely horrifying. Worst of all, they believe that this curse is contagious. When an individual is found to be displaying symptoms of the virus, they are often banished, either being exiled from their dynasty and sent off into the void of space, or more commonly, forced to reside deep in the undercroft of their tomb worlds, long forgotten dark places where they will be forever alone.
Get down in the basement.
Now over time, the flayed ones will
You can't come upstairs.
Through reality, the scent of blood from distant battlefields across the stars, drawing them together. Now, Necron armies do not traditionally utilize the flayed ones in war. More often, they materialize
Look out, sir.
seemingly at random at the
Somebody's
sites of
coming
great
for
battles
you.
that the Necrons are involved in. They rip through a portal into reality and descend on the battlefield like a wave of mechanical zombies, come to feast upon the flesh of the living. Now, it was thought for a long time that the flayed ones had no personality, that they had completely descended into madness, and any semblance of who they once were had been completely lost to history. Now, part of their transformation is the losing of the ability to speak, so there was no way to actually communicate with them. However, recently we've been given a much deeper insight into them, and the reality is actually far more depressing than we originally thought. You see, in the second novel of the Twice Dead King trilogy, it is revealed that the flayed ones still maintain their personalities. They are not as insane as we once thought. Now, they communicate through a series of taps, tapping their claws out in a binary system to communicate messages. Those who have been afflicted with the curse, no matter what stage they're in, can actually understand this, as if they were speaking the Necron's native language. Now, here's the saddest part. You see, these long-forgotten individuals that have been banished from their dynasties and forced to live in the shadows actually remain some of the most loyal subjects within Necron society. The protagonist of the story, the Necron Lord Oltex, ends up having a conversation with one of his friends who has completed his transformation into a flayed one. And without getting into spoilers, the Necron protagonist asks why the flayed ones continuously showed up to help them. And the flayed one is deeply saddened by this question and asks him, "Why do you think?" He implies that despite being banished and despite his people looking upon him as a monster, he still has a deep love for his dynasty. And no matter what, he is still loyal to his king and will show up whenever he needs him. Now, whether this is
Loyal
true
to
or
the
not
end.
of all flayed ones or just this particular group is still left unclear, but it certainly gives us a new insight into the workings of a particularly mysterious group.
My people shackled the stars and broke mortality when the species you sprang from had barely left your slime pool.
You slime
All
pools.
was burned reality, and the dominion of our kings was without limit. The ground you tread on is not yours,
But
it is
ours.
So how did the Necrons get here? Who were they before they became the undead metal skeletons that we
Lay
know
it
now?
on me, Wes. I don't
Now,
know.
way back in the before times, the Necrons did not
The
exist.
land before
But the
time.
species that would inevitably become them was known as the Necron tier. Now, this was a cursed and frail species that had the unfortunate fate of being born on an uncaring world next to a super radioactive star. Now, their planet was barren and hostile to life. And the sad truth of the matter was radiation sickness and cancers ran rampant through their society. They
That
lived
sucks.
incredibly short lives, and their lifespan was
So
filled with
that's
pain
why
and
they
suffering.
they
Now,
got
despite
rid
the
of the
overwhelming
flesh.
odds, the Necron
Their
tier
flesh
endured.
was
They
turning
weathered
bad
the
on them.
storm that was their destiny, and through some miracle, managed to reach the spacefaring age. Now, the Necron tier knew that if they stayed on their world, their species would inevitably wither and die. As through the generations, their species' deterioration was getting worse and worse.
Faster
so they
and
built
faster.
vast ships and set off in every direction, desperately trying to find a new place to live, so that their children would at least have a chance in this cold, hard galaxy that didn't
In
care
this
about them.
cold,
Now, as luck would
hard
have it, they
galaxy.
did encounter new worlds that were habitable, and this inspired a hope that the Necron tier had never experienced before. Here was their chance to start again, to give their people a real fighting chance. However, fate is fickle, and the curse of their homeworld followed them into the stars.
Yep.
Now, many generations would pass, and even though these
Can't catch
colonizers
a
were
break.
many light years away from their homeworld's sun, its light cast a far-reaching shadow, and the children born of these worlds still displayed signs of radiation sickness. No matter how many years passed,
Dang.
the new offspring's life expectancy remained the same. Just because they had escaped their world hadn't meant that they had escaped its curse. During this time, many new dynasties arose, and as luck would have it, they would encounter a species known as the Old Ones. And the two of them couldn't be more different from one another. The Old Ones were a race of impossible alien intelligence. They were immortal beings that lived in prosperity and were united in the goal of seeding life throughout the universe. You see, the Old Ones saw themselves as biological architects, guiding the evolution of the galaxy in the right direction. They would travel from planet to planet, placing the seeds of life upon each new world they discovered. Now, the Necron tier saw great potential in an alliance between the two species, and begged them for assistance. It was truly an example of the haves and the have-nots. The Old Ones had everything, and the Necron tier were dying.
Please.
Their children were dying. Their civilization would inevitably collapse, and like a gift from the gods, suddenly the Old Ones appeared to them. Now, they begged them to share with them their secrets of immortality. They begged them to save their children. And above all, the rigid and proud Necron tier dropped to their knees and begged the strangers for help.
They bent
And
the
in a
knee.
seeming pattern of misfortune, the Old Ones refused them. Now, the Old Ones followed a code very similar to the Prime Directive
not
in
today,
Star Trek,
sir.
choosing not to interfere with the destiny of the civilizations they encountered. The Necron tier were on their own, but they wished them the best of luck. Something broke in the Necron tier that day.
What?
Here were beings capable of
Screw
anything,
you.
that lived forever, that through no effort could save them, and yet they were refused. The rage and hatred the Necron tier felt for them cannot be understated, and with no thought of the seeming impossibility of such an action, the Necron tier declared war on the Old Ones. As one could expect, this would not go well. The Old Ones had no desire to fight them, but would defend themselves, and they were vastly more advanced than the Necron tier. Time after time, defeat after defeat, the Necron tier were pushed back and crushed against the technological superiority of the Old Ones. Now again, this was a war that the Old Ones had no time for and didn't want to be involved in the first place.
Maybe.
And at any point would have agreed to peace. But the Necron tier were relentless in their hatred, and the festering need for vengeance was growing deeper and deeper with every defeat. Now, if any good was to have come from this for the Necron tier people, it was that the united hatred of a singular enemy brought all of the dynasties together, which before this, wars between them had been rather commonplace. Now the Necron tier were united in their goal of eradicating the Old Ones. However, this seemed like nothing more than a dream of revenge, never to be brought to fruition. That was, however, until they encountered another species, one that rivaled the Old Ones in power and would prove to be the polar opposite of them. A species with no desire to spread life, only to consume it. Ancient beings that had complete mastery over physical reality. Star gods of devastating and terrifying proportions. These entities were known as the Catan.
The Catan.
Now, how the Necrons first made contact with them is
I feel like
still
I've
a
heard that
mystery.
name before.
Some say they were encountered by the study of stars, while others say the manifestation of the Necron tier hatred acted like a beacon to them. However it happened, their meeting would fundamentally alter the course of history and would give the Necron tier people what they were so desperate for: power and immortality. One of these beings came before the
It always comes at a price.
He said that they were familiar with the Old Ones, and much like the Necron tier, they also had a deep hatred for them. He spun a tale about how the Old Ones were their ancient enemies, and for the galaxy to prosper,
I think
they
he's
must be
playing
purged.
you, sir.
The reality is that the Catan were basically star-sucking vampires, massive beings of pure energy that would descend upon a star and leech out all of its energy, condemning
looks
all
so cool.
life in its solar system to death. So great was the hunger of the Catan that they spread across the galaxy like a swarm of locusts, destroying all in their path. Their existence was antithetical to the mission of the Old Ones to bring life to the galaxy, and thus the Old Ones declared war on them, seeing their existence as nothing short of blasphemous. Needless to say, this was not the story the
You
scientists
can't
told.
exist.
However, this great lie would prove to be fitting, as that entity's name would later be known as the Deceiver. So the Necron tier would come to accept the Deceiver's offer,
The Deceiver.
and thus crafted for him and all the other Catan bodies of living metal. Now, this was made out of a stuff called necrodermis, which was one of the inventions of the Necron tier that
Yes,
they
yes,
used in their starships.
necrondermis.
Now, this would inevitably be used to construct the metal forms of the Necrons we know today, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, before this, the Catan were basically beings of pure energy, and with their newfound bodies, they were able to experience the physical universe on a level they never had before.
Okay.
Now, this alliance would prove fruitful for the Necron tier as well.
Is that the
because
Human
the
Torch?
Catan gave them remarkable gifts. Now, the powers of these individuals were like that of gods. They created for the Necron tier weapons and machines that they could only dream of. Invigorated by their newfound discoveries, their lust for war was once again ignited. The Necron tier were so enraptured by the power of the star gods that they actually began to worship them. And this makes sense because from the Necron tier's perspective, the Catan were their saviors. And through their power, they deliver the wrath of the Necron tier people upon
Old
all
ones
that
you
stood
could have
before them.
helped.
High and mighty old ones, who despite their self-proclaimed benevolence, condemned their people to a slow and agonizing death, and would soon pay for their hubris. The combined might of the Catan and the Necron tier would see their empires burn to ash, and the great legacy that they thought to craft for themselves lost to the annals of time, all records of them purged from existence, so none would remember that such a species ever even existed. Now, the technology level and overall military might of the Necron tier skyrocketed practically overnight. With the power of the Catan and their immensely destructive weapons of war, all would bow before the combined might of the gods of the physical universe and their esteemed mortal followers. But the Catan had made two promises to the Necron tier people. That of power, but also of immortality. The next gift that they proposed would rid their people of their frail and sickly forms. They would be forever free from disease and suffering.
Traded in your flesh.
Would become gods in their own right, and would build kingdoms that would never die, and all it would cost them was their souls. Monolithic
flesh
towering
and
furnaces
soul.
were constructed on every world that would burn away their withered frames and replace it with bodies of living metal, the same material that the Catan now inhabited. Now, the first to undergo the process of biotransference, as it would later be called, was none other than the Silent King himself. Now, he strode into the furnace, and all that he ever was burned away and replaced with undying metal. The process was a success. He felt power that no Necron tier had ever felt before. He was strong.
Wait. What? He walks into this giant furnace. It burns everything away, and he's left with that? Sounds like some kind of magic. Because I don't think that's how it happens when, you put humans into fire. I don't think so. No!
He was strong, vital, and his mind was operating faster than he even thought possible. But there was something deeply wrong. Something deep inside him was missing. It was like he was looking at the world from behind glass.
His
he had
soul?
newfound power and freedom, unlike anything his people had ever experienced before. But something was deeply wrong. He felt empty and hollow. The realization of what he had done and what he had committed his people to slowly dawned on him. He had no soul. He was now nothing more than an engram copy of consciousness, stored on an immortal robot. This process would be repeated billions of times over on thousands of worlds. His people were plunged into the fires of biotransference, their bodies disintegrated and their souls ripped apart by the gorging feasting of the gluttonous Catan. For you see, the Catan did in fact wish to provide what they had promised. However, the energy of suns had long sensed being appealing to them, and they instead found newfound joy in feasting on a different energy altogether. The souls of the living. Now, some individuals walked into the furnace of their own free will, as it was their ruler's will to do so. Others were dragged in, kicking and screaming. It mattered not, as eventually, it was done.
I ain't even gonna say it.
Biotransference of the entire species had been a success. And on that day, the Necron tier died. Confined to the halls of history,
and the Necrons
another name in the vast
were
book of
born.
extinct species. And standing amongst their ashes was only the Necrons. Now, the Deceiver had one final gift for the Silent King. For of all his desires, the mightiest was for his people to be unified. I wish that the Catan made more possible than anyone could have thought. as all of the Necrons had installed in them command protocols. That meant they could not physically disobey him. On one hand, the Silent King was completely horrified by this. He realized the depth of what he had done, and in doing such, he had doomed his entire species. But it is not like the Necrons to look back. A king does not make mistakes, and a king marches forward.
He has mind control over all of them.
The galaxy had ever seen, and this army,
Why?
along with its
Not
patron
cool.
gods, took to the stars and their mighty tomb ships to bring a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen to their ancient enemies. And the empire of the Old Ones would inevitably burn. The combined might of the
to the
immortal armies of
ground.
the Necrons and their godlike powers of the Catan brought war upon the Old Ones and their kingdoms for countless millennia, eventually pushing the Old Ones nearly to complete extinction. Driven by a need for
Never
vengeance,
tiring,
the Necrons
never
burned
faltering.
millions of worlds, while the Catan feasted on the souls of the living. Countless lesser races created by the Old Ones were eradicated by the Necrons, while their gods gorged on their souls, erasing them completely from existence. Now, it was at this time that two major turning points occurred. The first was that the Catan began to war with each other for dominance over their siblings. Their hubris was so great that they each thought themselves the mightiest. They turned on each other one by one until only a handful were left. Now, the Old Ones took advantage of this infighting and began to create warrior
Fighting
races.
amongst
Now,
yourself,
their creations
bickering.
before this point were given the choice to make their own paths and develop in accordance with their own individual destinies. However, these were incredibly desperate times, and races specifically crafted for war were needed. The Old Ones created the Orcs and the Eldari, one massive hulking brutes, each bearing the might of an entire army in a single individual. The ancient ancestors of the Orcs were actually known as the Krorks and stood around 13 meters tall. Not to mention, it was highly likely that the Krorks had a fundamental understanding of their reality-bending powers and were able to fully utilize them to great effect.
Heck
The
yeah.
Eldari, on the other hand, were massively powerful psychers, and each one had an innate connection to the warp. These new races would spread across the galaxy, battling and pushing back the Necrons wherever they were encountered. And as it turns out, the powers of the warp were unbelievably effective against the Catan. You see, they were gods of the physical universe and had no link to the Immaterium. They had no ability to deny such raw and devastating psychic attacks. The combined might of the Old Ones, the Eldar, and the Krorks pushed back against the Necrons and their sinister masters. Now, this is a time period that is incredibly shrouded in mystery, and it's on a scale unlike anything we've ever seen before. Imagine a singular war that spanned the entirety of the galaxy. Now, the one that we know in the 41st millennium is a galaxy that has millions of wars happening simultaneously. But there are vast sectors of space that are seemingly peaceful, or are at least removed from the greater conflict. Now, this was a battle that raged across all of the stars. We can't even really comprehend just how immense it was, or how many unique individuals were involved. There must have been millions of heroes, each with countless war stories that could fill entire libraries. Now, the Warhammer universe has around 600 novels written so far, and this time period could probably have far more than that written about it. It was so immense that it is aptly named the War in Heaven. Now, at one point during the war, the Catan tried to push back against the psychic onslaught by creating massive pylons made of blackstone. These were constructed on hundreds, if not thousands, of worlds across the galaxy. You see, blackstone is a material that cannot be affected by warp sorcery, and thus was constructed to try to tamper the enemy's ability to channel it. These pylons were used to hold back the warp, which before this, the Sea of Souls was actually a pretty tranquil place compared to the warp that we know today in the 41st millennium. It was the absolute onslaught of souls pouring into the warp day after day, and the unbridled fury and hatred of quintillions of individuals locked in internal conflict that began to make the Sea of Souls into a roaring maelstrom. The once tranquil denizens of the warp turned into twisted monstrosities, its once peaceful tides becoming a twisted, chaotic nightmare of pain and suffering. The warp became a sick reflection of itself and came to be known as the Realm of Chaos. Unfortunately for the Old Ones, a combination of the might of the Catan, their legions of Necron soldiers, and the dark and twisted warp manifestations that their own creations had unleashed, in the end proved to be too much for even the godlike Old Ones. As their kingdoms burned, the Old Ones disappeared from existence.
Weren't up to snuff.
Whether or not every one of them met their end during this period, or they fled our galaxy, it still remains a mystery. But the Old Ones were gone, and the Necrons had finally achieved their vengeance. But this wasn't the end of the War in Heaven, for you see, the entire time the war had been going on, the Silent King had planned his revenge on a second enemy. The Catan had lied. They had tricked him into betraying his own people. And a king lets no slight against his subjects go unanswered. Zar commanded the Necrons to turn on their gods, and for all their intelligence and all their power, This was something the Catan were incapable of predicting, as they were hubris made manifest. The very concept that their subjects could rise against them was anathema to them.
Nah,
The
ain't gonna
Necrons
happen.
harnessed weaponry of god-killing power and shattered all of the Catan into thousands of individual fragments. Each one was then locked in a tesseract fold, so it could
Metal.
never again be free to roam the stars, chained forever by those who they once ruled over. The fate of the Catan was to be eternally shackled to the war machines of the Necrons. In the far future, their essence would be used to bring devastation to distant battlefields.
You screw
For
us,
now,
we gonna screw
they
you
would remain
too.
Prisoners. Now, after this was done, the Silent King contemplated what to do next. Both of his great enemies had been utterly
We're
destroyed.
gonna
However, the galaxy
go to
was
sleep
in turmoil.
for a
Warp
few
spawned monstrosities
million
known as
years.
the Enslavers were running rampant throughout the galaxy. In addition, the Eldar had rose to prominence and were incredibly powerful. The Necrons had been solely focused on wiping out the old ones, and it had cost them an enormous portion of their population. In their weakened state, they had no hope of defeating the Eldari and reclaiming the stars. With this in mind, the Silent King ordered the construction of vast tomb complexes on all of their worlds that dug deep within the earth. It was
They
there
going
that
to
he
sleep.
ordered his people to rest, to sleep for millions of years. It was the Eldar who would inherit the galaxy, and there was nothing they could do to stop
Millions
this.
of
But the Necrons know
years.
more than anyone else that time is an enemy to all but the Necrons.
Yeah,
For their immortal forms could never truly die.
flesh.
And the Eldar Empire
No
would rise
flesh.
and fall, just as all empires do. The Silent King set the clock to awaken 60 million years in the future, to inherit whatever was left of the galaxy. The Eldar would be long dead, and whatever new species had crawled its way out of the primordial ooze would not be ready to face the Necrons, and they would once
Not
again
a
take their
chance.
rightful place as the rulers of the
At
galaxy.
the tippity
After all the
tippity
Necrons
top.
were locked in stasis, the Silent King had one thing left to do to atone for his sins. He severed the command protocols. The will of the Necron people would be theirs once again.
Heck
Upon
yeah.
their awakening, they would finally be free. After
Heck
doing
yeah,
this, he
that's what I'm
exiled
talking
himself.
about.
He hopped in a ship and took off for the void of space. What he hoped to find out there between the stars is known only to him, but he vowed to return, to see his people as they awoke once more. It is now the 41st millennium. The alarm clock has finally gone off. One by one, the surviving tomb worlds are coming
And
back online.
they are
Memories from
ready
60 million
to
years
get
ago
up
still fresh in
and
the minds of
F
the
some
newly
crap
awakened
up.
overlords. Now, with their free will reestablished, the dynasties are no longer united in all things. But they do, however,
Could be
agree on
bad.
one, that the galaxy belongs only
To them.
and the verminous filth that has come to inhabit it must be completely and utterly eradicated.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be making a lot more long-form lore videos like this.
Heck yeah.
As well as all the little short-form ones that I've been doing for like the last year and a half. I'm trying to strike a good balance between the two of them.
It's
I do
hard.
really enjoy doing these longer deep dives, but they do take a little bit more time to put together.
Definitely.
And I'm still kind of new to doing them. I've made about 5 so far.
You're
but
doing a
I'm
great
still kinda
job,
learning
Wes.
how to do,
Great job, my
Premiere and
friend.
Photoshop and all the stuff that's required for that.
Me
Also, I just
too.
want to take a second to thank my patrons, because honest to God, if it wasn't for you guys, I would not be here right now. I would have had to stop doing lore content a long time ago. And if you enjoy what I do and you want to help support it, go ahead and go to my Patreon, see if you want to make a pledge. You don't have to, honestly, just hanging out with me and, you know, watching my videos.
Let's
all the
go
way
check
through,
it out,
helps
guys.
enormously.
Check out
Also,
Wes.
if you have any other questions about the Necrons on like where they came from or what their weapons are like or anything like that, go ahead and post them down in the comments. I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can. Not to mention, if you have any suggestions for how to make even better content, I'm all ears. Because
Me
that's
too.
honestly how
Let me
I get
know.
better, is by learning from you guys. So
You,
thanks a ton for hanging out with
you-
me. I'm going to try to make some more of these videos
you guys.
soon, and I'm actually looking to do a live stream pretty soon. So look forward to that.
Me
All right,
too.
y'all have a great day
Once I
and happy wargaming.
figure out how and the right settings. Alrighty, guys. Well, that was Weshammer, the Necrons. Now, guys, I've gotta say, like, Wes does such a freaking phenomenal job. Now, I feel like with Major Kill, he doesn't go into enough detail, but with like Baltimore stuff, it's a little hard to sit through the long content. But Wes, just the animations, the stories, man, he's killing it. Wes, kudos to you, my friend. I like your videos. I might sub to your Patreon. I don't know. We'll see. But guys, I know that you have been asking to see Luton 09's the Imperium of Man. Now, I hear that it's like 10 hours worth of content. And while I am excited to do it for you guys, we're going to have to break that down into some manageable chunks, because I ain't got all that time. But for you guys, we going to make it happen. So sometime later this week, maybe early next week, we gonna do the Imperium of Man for you guys by Luton 09. But guys, with that being said, that was the Necrons. Crazy MFers. Crazy. Traded they strength of the flesh for the strength of Necrodermis. Really cool. Really cool. And I like that the Silent King at the very end just turned off that command prompt, so he's not really in control. That's awesome. That's boss. That's loyalty. That's GOAT status. That's really cool. But guys, with that being said, that's going to be the end of the video for tonight. Hope y'all enjoyed it. If you have anything you would like me to check out, let's go ahead and throw it down in the comments for me, you guys. And before you head out that door, just let's like, subscribe, you know, we're almost at 1,000. Let's get there together, guys. And once we get there, let's get to like 10,000, maybe, I don't know. Let's get to 1,000 first, and we'll see what happens. Did you want to make an appearance? I think somebody wants to make an appearance and pop her head at him.
No.
But guys, like I said, that's going to be the end of the video for tonight. Hope y'all have a great day, morning, noon, night, whatever it is for you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace, love, happiness to you. And always, guys, be easy. Love y'all.